Welcome back to the Fronczak Files. I'm Tracey Hastings.
And I'm Paul Jack Fronczak.
In last week's episode, we spoke with C.C. Moore, renowned genetic genealogist and the powerhouse behind so many groundbreaking identifications. C.C. walked us through how she used genetic genealogy to confirm the discovery of the real Paul, who'd been missing for over 50 years.
It was C.C.'s expertise, combined with emerging DNA technology, that cracked the mystery that had haunted my family and the FBI for decades. Her work helped turn years of confusion into a moment of clarity and truth.
But to truly understand the magnitude of that moment, we have to go back to the beginning. Let's briefly revisit this event, which set into motion a lifetime of questions, pain, and loss.
Paul Joseph Fronczak was born April 26, 1964 at 1:20 a.m. in room 418 of Meyer House, Maternity Wing, Michael Reese Hospital, Chicago. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, had a shock of dark hair and large expressive eyes. Baby Paul was kidnapped from his mother's arms the next day by a woman posing as a nurse. Said she was from the ear, nose, and throat department. Other mothers reported they had a mysterious visitor to their rooms that day, and it appeared she was baby shopping, looking for a baby with specific physical attributes. She took the baby, went down the hallway, down 4 flights of stairs, out a back door, got into a waiting cab, and disappeared.
The kidnapper was described as a white female, approximately 40 years old, standing 5 foot 4 inches tall, with dark, possibly graying hair, a ruddy complexion, and red cheeks. Body type was described as plump, wearing a white smock, quote, the type worn by beauty operators and possibly made of nylon, unquote, according to an eyewitness. The outfit was completed with white shoes and stockings, but missing the distinctive nurse's head covering. Police sketch artist Otis Rathel created this composite based off the eyewitness descriptions. Chicago PD contacted local taxi companies who sent out an alert to their drivers to be on the lookout for the kidnapper.
In this episode, we're joined by Dr. Angela Williamson, a key figure in both my identity case and the effort to find the real Paul Fronczak. Through her work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Angela played a unique role in connecting the dots that finally brought us answers and closure after decades of questions.
This is the Fronczak Files, Episode 6, Part 2, The Answer. Welcome, Dr. Williamson.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a real honor.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I've been a forensic DNA specialist for about 20 years now. That's involved working in government and state crime labs, in the lab, examining the evidence, as director of casework in crime labs. And then I went to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where Paul's case crossed my desk. I also, we'll get back to that, but I also worked at the Department of Justice as their forensics unit supervisor for 10 years, then before returning to Bodhi Technology, which is a very large private forensic DNA lab in America, and I'm their cold case specialist.
I like that word, cold case. That's always, when you hear that, you know you're dealing with the right people.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your first experience, first reading about Paul's case?
Yeah, Paul's case literally got handed to me at my desk at NECMEC, which is the abbreviation for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's a lot of words. So hopefully everyone will know what I'm talking about when I say NECMEC a lot. So at that time, I supervised the unidentified children's team, which meant that we were trying to put names to mainly deceased children. Most of these children were sadly homicide victims. Most had not been reported missing, and they were in unmarked graves. And they dated back decades. So like Paul's case, but sadly most of these children were deceased. And we did have a few what we call living does. And hopefully Paul's heard that word before, because your case came to me. You were a living John Doe. So it came to me when you had done the test, the ancestry test, figured out you weren't the biological child of your parents. And then who were you? So you became a case that came to my team to try and help figure out your true identity, mainly using forensics and the missing and unidentified databases that are available to law enforcement across the country. And I'll just say I remember reading the story, looking at the newspaper clippings and how you were repatriated with your parents when you were 2, and we were just all sitting there scratching our heads, not judging, just scratching our heads at what had happened in your case, and then how you had opened the Pandora's box when you took that little test. So obviously, we wanted to get you your true identity. And then we were working also with the long term missing team because baby Paul's case then got reopened. And that was then a long term missing child's case. So, yeah, Paul, when you took that test, a lot happened.
A lot's still happening, right? It's not over yet. So when this case first hit you and your team, was this something like a little bit different than what you've been dealing with?
We did have a few living doe cases, none with a story like yours, none with the circumstances like yours. So it's not that we didn't know what to do next, but again, you were probably one of 3 living doe cases that we had out of hundreds of children without names. So yours had a happier story because we still had you, but very different circumstances.
I generally work a lot with genetic genealogy, but the forensic side is totally fascinating to me. And could you tell us about the role that you played as far as the investigation went?
Yeah, so the core thing what we do with any unidentified case is to get your DNA and to upload it to the missing and unidentified indices of CODIS. So as everyone know, CODIS is the national DNA database used by law enforcement, medical examiners, and coroners. So our hope is always with a child that someone reported you missing and that either your parents, your biological parents, or some family members that knew about your case had given DNA. And that DNA kind of runs in the missing index. And then when you have an unidentified person, whether they're living or deceased, you upload their DNA and see if you get a hit. Obviously, we did not get a hit with you, but that's our first step. Our first step is to make sure your case is entered into databases that, again, the criminal justice system searches, and to use the basic what we call biometrics, which sounds very clinical when you're talking to a person who is an unidentified individual. We're collecting, your biometrics. I can't remember, but I would have. Do you remember if your fingerprints were collected?
I don't remember doing fingerprints, just DNA.
I think you would have if
Yeah.
they had been collected, but technically they could have been because they don't change. I mean, your fingers get bigger, but your fingerprints don't change. So they could have been, although when an infant was abducted, it's very rare. Footprints are usually collected. It would have been funny if someone had to try to print your feet, but we definitely start with DNA.
Yeah.
You've done stranger things, right?
I have done stranger things, yeah.
And then kind of what you've been doing for so many years now is social media. We created a Facebook page. It's called Help ID Me, and it's just all the unidentified children. And so we feature their profiles and have had a lot of identifications that way from it might be they were in the foster system and it's another foster kid that recognizes them or someone from school or a teacher. So your case and circumstances, it was out there. So NECMEC was trying to get you identified as well.
It's funny that you mentioned NECMEC because it took me over a year just to get my case in front of NECMEC because of the whole missing persons case, which I'll talk about at a different time, but it was a nightmare. Nothing's been easy about this whole story. But I was so happy once we were able to start working with NECMEC because I knew then things would start progressing, age progression photos, things like that.
Yeah, their resources are amazing. And their help for families as well. I don't know if your parents ever got any advocacy help, but there's a whole division of NECMEC that provides that, which I think is even just as critical as what my team used to do with the DNA.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, this is an interesting spin on your story for sure to hear about it from the this side of it, the more legal criminal side. We tend to focus on the emotional side and how this upset everyone's lives, yours, your parents, Paul's, everybody's. But this is an interesting peek at what was going on behind the scenes while all that emotional drama was unfolding for all of you.
Yeah, a lot of people involved. So, Angela, when you were started working on this, what breakthroughs or what information were you able to ascertain?
The biggest breakthrough in your case was forensic genetic genealogy, which I'll shorten to FGG for the audience. So FGG was NECMEC really was the first place where it started to be used for criminal cases. So it was actually another living doe case. It was a female living doe who her story was a little darker than yours, had been abducted by, it turned out, a serial killer. I had been involved in her case, and they were actually using FGG to get her real identity, and then that led to the identity also of the man who abducted her, who turned out to be a serial killer. So it was all kind of unraveling, and this is a few years before Golden State broke. And so in your case, essentially, FGG, genetic genealogy, you'd already used it yourself because you'd uploaded your DNA and it went, one of these things is not like the other one. You are not a member of this family. But then you are able to then use that technology to figure out biologically who you really were. But then the cool thing was we're all sitting there and I was like, well, what if we use FGG to try and figure out who baby Paul is? Because we had your parents' DNA, obviously. So it was kind of reverse FGG because normally you have the subject. So we have you and trying to find out what family tree you came from, or we have a suspect and trying to figure out where they belong to. But with baby Paul, we knew who he belonged to, we just didn't know where he was. So the hope was with FGG, you could mine, in a way, is kind of a word we use, your family's DNA, your parents' DNA, to see if there were any associations, which eventually led to baby Paul. So I think it's horrible to reduce it to your case was a great precedent. It's horrible. It sounds very clinical. But if anything good came out of your case, I mean, obviously, we have you healthy, you had great parents, but it was really set a great model for other abducted children, especially infant abductions. And to this day, NECMEC and other agencies are using that FGG approach, that genealogy approach, to try and figure out where these infants came from, whether they're abducted from a hospital or whether you think it's a parental abduction, but the child maybe have been told a story their whole life by one parental unit, but then they can use this methodology to figure out where's the other parent and what happened and who they truly are. So if you think of anything about all of this, all the drama, or obviously a lot of hurt and heartache and a lot of things to deal with, but it was really cool from an investigative and a science point of view. It really was cool from my nerdy science brain that we could use this to help solve more cases and to help more families.
Well, that's fantastic because, by Paul being kidnapped, that was able to set in motion Code Pink in hospitals, which ended up helping a lot of, infants from being kidnapped from hospitals. And now my side of it, or the Paul side, also helped with FGG and helping other people and, saving other people and finding them. So if you can find those good things in all this tragedy, then it's still a good day.
Yeah, I left NECMEC after baby Paul was found, but I got a call and yeah, it was a good day.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So let's switch gears a little bit and maybe talk about using your background and your your acumen towards this, and how would you maybe identify or help identify someone that would take an infant from a hospital?
Yeah, so I'm just going to preface it with that I'm not a profiler. I've just spent a lot of time around them and helped them on investigations. But I had a lot of time at NECMEC exposed to these cases and then assisting on them with the FBI's behavioral analysis unit. And what you typically see is women who do this are usually very much undergoing a lot of mental and emotional trauma, which is not an excuse and not sympathy, but you it's really not a rational person acting out of malice who does this. It's often a woman who may have had a lot of miscarriages or has been told that she can't have children. And it's horrible because they're trying to fill this horrible void in their life, but by doing so, they create that in another family's life. And I think that's what they don't recognize. And again, I'm not here to judge or anything, but that's usually what you see because the women who do this don't typically hurt these children. They raise them as their own, and often I would see, especially in NCMEC, when they'd find an abducted infant, they'd be like, "Well, I had a great life. I love my mom. Like, I only found this out because I went to get my driver's license and couldn't find my birth certificate, and then mom started acting weird." So yeah, typically these children have good lives and are very much cared for. Unfortunately, there's a lot of suffering, and when it comes to light, boy, as you know, everyone's life is turned upside down and changed forever.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Even down to like the cab driver that picked up the kidnapper from the hospital that day. All these people that you never think about. People just think about the immediate family or the victim that's actually involved. But there's so many other people that these things touch, and it stays with them their whole lives.
There's really no happy ending because when it all comes to light, you have typically a woman who, I will say, acting under duress when they did it and then raised this child, loves this child. But what they did is not right. And they have to be held accountable. But it's horrible. You don't want to say, "Oh, it's okay, you don't deserve to be punished," but it's horrible. There's just no happy ending.
With the abduction of baby Paul, there's some interesting and unique circumstances surrounding it. As far as the execution and the planning of it, so what is your assessment of that? Do you feel like the kidnapper fit into that sort of description that you just gave, or do you feel like there was something else maybe at play here?
I've honestly never seen one where a woman or a family used someone else to do the kidnapping when they wanted to raise the child. I've never seen that. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. I've definitely worked cases where there's been amazing ruses used. I've seen one where they're like, "Oh, we're going to take photographs of your children." Everyone wants to get their babies photographed, and they kidnap them. Like, "Oh, you go rest, you go lay down, you're a tired mom." And then they wake up and their children's gone. So to see, someone impersonating a nurse and being that bold, not beyond the realm of possibility that it was actually the person who raised the child. And I'm not saying that Lorraine did this, but you do see that in cases where you would think it would be difficult for someone going through this to actually pull it off, but it happens. And I think, much more innocent times back in the 60s, right? People were, I think, much more trusting, and I think we're all very skeptical and more on high alert today for because we just know don't trust anyone, right? I think it was easier to do things like that.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the previous episodes about how the timeline is just very different when you go back to the early to mid 60s. Society was a very different place, and people's idea of society was very different. People leaving their kids outside of a store while they go inside to shop, a common occurrence in the 60s. No one would ever do that now, I would hope.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as a 70s baby, I came home when it got dark.
Same,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
You go out, your mother doesn't want you underfoot all day. Get out of here. Go play.
Mhm.
When the street lights come on, you need to come home.
Yeah.
So how far did you guys get at NCMEC in this investigation?
When I left, it was still trying to figure out who you were, and then it had started the path to figure out where baby Paul might be. So that's kind of where I left off, but I know they were still heavily involved in obviously working with CC on the genealogy side. So that's kind of where it ended for me, and I've been following your story for years because I hate to say you were one of my cases, but it was just a very intriguing thing that had happened, and I loved seeing it unfold and how persistent you were in driving it because it's honestly like a lot of cold cases, it's the family that drives it. Usually not the person in the middle of it driving it, but yeah, it's been really great to see how far you come.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And it's, because of the amazing work that NECMEC does and, people like you, you guys are good at what you do and thank God you're doing it.
I'm just sort of blown away by the idea that, taking something that we already knew about, the forensic genetic genealogy, like you had said, Dr. Williamson, to take the person who's tested and build the tree out from there, but instead to do it in reverse, that you were able to take the technique, flip it, and then use it to be able to identify an individual through family members, which is, sort of the opposite of how people envision doing genealogy. They start with themselves and they work outward. Did you have a team that was working with you, people that did the genealogy portion? Was that you doing that?
Oh, no, I am not a genealogist. I am a hardcore traditional DNA forensic person. Genealogy, I've been heavily involved in and work a lot. I've worked a lot, especially with the FBI investigative genetic genealogy team. Worked a lot of cases using it, so I know how to use it. I know how to help track down family members. But gosh, I do not know how genealogists look at all the centimorgans and go, oh well, this person fits here, and I can analyze regular DNA profiles all day long, but not that. So, yeah, especially when I was at NECMEC, my job was to kind of, I don't want to say wrangle, but get everyone doing their respective part in the process. Did we need a profiler? Did I need to call someone at the FBI to track down the original interviews and search the case files for potential names, witnesses, who hadn't been run down, who's still alive? NECMEC does have a great team of analysts, so they can, proof of life who people that you want to go interview, look at where people have lived, do timelines. They can do timelines and subjects and people of interest as well. So it's a huge team effort and multidisciplinary, getting everyone that you need to the table. The great thing at NECMEC is when you made a call, no one ever said no. You're calling from NECMEC. So everyone's always going to jump to help.
So when you were there, did you work with the FBI on the Fronczak kidnapping? Were you able to see any of the files that they had?
I was not privy to the files, but definitely had conversations with FBI members.
About the files? Because here at the Fronczak Files, we're really into files. That's what we look for. We look for
some of
files.
Those we would really love to see.
Because I filed a bunch of FOIA requests, and of course I got nothing. And I remember that when this first opened, I think they opened it because I was I was making a big thing about it. And that's why they reopened it. And then when they reopened it, they said that they actually had all the original case files. And I was just wondering, has anybody ever seen these case files? Because I really don't think they've done anything to actively solve the kidnapping of Paul. Even though I feel like Jack, legally I'm still Paul. And I should have some access to stuff, because I think that honestly we could solve this if we just had access to what they're not using.
You know who you truly are now. Obviously, there's ongoing efforts to try and find Jill. So you got to look at it from a higher level, from a law enforcement point of view. They're like, well, that bit's kind of like they have an open file on Jill. And like things are churning and always searching on that angle. But then it comes down to the rest of the story, which then I think law enforcement would see it as they would take you out of it. So then it's kind of two different stories intertwined. But if you view it from your part in it, I think it would be seen as your part's kind of wrapped up, just except for your missing twin sister.
Well, one of the things that makes it difficult is the DNA says that he's not Paul Joseph Fronczak, yet legally he is. And so it's caught him in a spot where you're not Paul and you're not Jack. And so how to go forward from that to get any information on either one of those cases it's just such an unusual situation.
So, Angela, today what you've shared with us is priceless, amazing information. And I really can't thank you enough for your time. I know that you're very busy. You're always looking to dig that next grave or help somebody out. And that's we're very lucky to have you today. Is there anything you'd like to promote?
No, what I really want to promote is funding cold cases, making sure those resources are there for people like Paul and his family and anyone else who has answers that have gone without a resolution for decades. It's so important. We need to be compassionate, we need to be empathetic, and I think every law enforcement department needs to have a cold case unit.
I agree 100%. And someone that actually knows how to do cold cases.
Absolutely. There's too much of beat cops and cops working current cases, and they're like, well, we work cold cases, when we can, and that's not fair to the investigators or to the case. It needs specialized teams who can devote their time to it. Yes, your case is a little more complex than most, but when you really do get into cold cases, they're very in depth and they take a lot of time. And it's so much harder to track down witnesses and persons of interest decades later. So they can't be a part time affair. It's a full time effort with highly specialized investigators and a team of experts to help.
I agree 100%. Tracey, how was your experience work with Angela today?
I am also nerding out about all the forensics and DNA. Uh, and yeah, we appreciate your time so much and your expertise. Thank you for helping us to sort of understand it from that forensic and legal side, because that is a very important part of this case and being able to move everything forward. Hopefully someday identifying the kidnapper.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I will just say, from my point of view, I don't think I've ever met a John Doe before. So, Jack, again, it's been an absolute honor. And I'm just so impressed by what you're all doing to drive what happened to you forward and try and figure out the final pieces of the puzzles.
Thank you, Angela. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
We want to give a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Angela Williamson for sharing her time, her knowledge, and her unwavering dedication to solving Doe cases and breathing life back into cold cases. Your work is truly making a difference, and we're honored you could be a part of Jack's journey of discovery. And the story doesn't end here. In our next episode, we'll be joined by private investigator and former Secret Service member Nino Parada, a man whose determination and investigative skills have brought new energy and innovative techniques to the search for Jack's missing twin sister Jill, as well as tracking down elusive members of Jack's biological family. Trust us, you won't want to miss it.